Welcome to VUC 2019, Visions Under Construction. You see, that's all she wrote. But we do have a couple of announcements to fill, and one of them is be sure to come and meet many of us at Camellia World. James, jump in and give me the dates of Camellia World.
Oh, it's the beginning of
around May something, I don't know.
May something, isn't it?
It's so far away, we don't really know.
I love it when you just say, you say, drop that in.
Yeah, drop it in. Well, we'll find it.
Give me a second, I'll look it up.
We will find it. I think, let me guess, 6th to 9th. Who's got the fastest calendar around?
Jay left the call.
Okay. What else? Other things. I was just listening to the Sam Harris podcast, and he happened to have Renee Diaspora as a guest. She's been probably on Twit or something. I don't know. I've heard her before. She's a data analyst who's been looking at all the social media things since about 2014, I think. They started with the anti-vaxxers campaign. There was a huge campaign in California to counter the effects and try to get the bill, which I don't have in front of me, but the bill for everybody to vaccinate. Anyway, long story short, she worked on the elections and the Russian unit called the IRA, the Internet Something Agency. And those things are posted. I posted them in both the YouTube chat and on IRC. So that reached probably something like between 0 and 2 people. I don't know. Yes, James.
I have the dates. It's 6th to the 8th of May this year, 2019. So most of us will be flying out the evening or the afternoon before to get together for a big sausage and a beer or something like that before the fun begins.
Okay. So the biggest news is Mira coming. We don't know yet. Okay. If you're ready, Hank, I'm going to give your intro to give us a little bit of news on our favorite federated platform, which is called
Diaspora. At least that's how I say it.
Diaspora.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
Diaspora.
Tomato, basil, same sort of thing.
You've been working on the API, and I don't know, it's maybe something else. And I presumably other people are working. This is interesting. You know that a lot of us joined, a lot of regulars from the VUC in 2010 joined. And we checked in once a year since then, and nothing was happening. And since the closure of Google+, there's been a lot more activity, and I'm seeing a lot of interesting people coming on. I happen to be on pluspora.com, but I'm also on the other 2 main ones. I'm just not active there. Anyway, Hank, let's hear what's up with what's new.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that there was nothing happening. There were actually lots of things that are happening. A lot of that stuff happens in the back end. Over the last few years, the development team had been making a lot of large changes to the federation, lots of user interface tweaks and that sort of thing. One of the things which has been requested since the beginning of the project is an API. APIs are useful for creating web clients mobile clients, or tying in the system in other ways besides through federation. The team put together a specification for that about a couple of years ago. But as I said, the Diaspora project, like most open source software, is all volunteer effort, and the API actually is something which requires a lot of horsepower. It's hundreds of hours of work that has to get put in to get it brought across the finish line, and we aren't across the finish line yet. But what we do have is work did begin in earnest about 1.5 years ago. At the end of this year, we actually have a feature complete API. For non-developers, what feature complete means is that it does everything that it's supposed to, but there's a lot of shakeout period that has to happen. So think about, for example, your computer, for instance, there's like the next version of Windows or your operating system, or the next version of iOS on your device. The feature complete version of that was released to developers months before it got pushed to your phone. There's a lot of work that goes between something being feature complete ready for testing in the real world and something being completed. However, that is still a very important milestone, especially considering how long people have been requesting it and how much work went into that. And so we're really pleased to say that has been a big part of what's come out. There are also some discussions in the discourse forum. I guess before I go too far into that, there are lots of ways to communicate with the development team and the development on the Diaspora project. GitHub is the place where all of the source code is done. There's issue trackers. That's where you get pull requests in. So if you have something to contribute, however, for more day-to-day type conversation. So if you're a user and you're like, oh, this thing isn't quite working, or I would like it to try to do this, those sorts of conversations and others, there's a online forum software system called Discourse, and Diaspora happens to have their own Discourse channel. So on there are discussions about what sorts of major features do we want to see in or try to achieve in the 2019 major release cycle. And there are the favorites that everyone has been requesting for a long time, things like editing posts, things like being able to like comments, those sorts of things. And while obviously, again, going back to this is a volunteer effort, but even in traditional software development programs, commercial, there are no guarantees about when things will be there. Having community input in terms of what people would like to see and to be kind of kept abreast as progress is made on those sorts of things will be very important. And that's a good place to do that as well as the traditional Diaspora blog where releases are information are posted and that sort of thing. So there's actually a lot of good energy coming in. As you said, Cambridge Analytica and the collapse of the Google Plus ecosystem has brought in a lot of new people. I happen to be one of them. You guys were here in 2010. I remember reading about this in 2010 or 2011. And it was one of those things that was bouncing around the back of my mind. Geez, I should really get off Facebook and Twitter and those sorts of things. And Cambridge Analytica was the straw that broke the camel's back. And lo and behold, there was a vibrant community. And we just want to make it even more vibrant by continuing to contribute and keep moving the ball forward.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm a big fan, of course, and we'll be hearing about it throughout 2019, at least, much to the chagrin of the James Bodies. Just 1 second, Jay, I just wanted to mention that you can also contribute now to the Diaspora effort, and the easiest way to do that I can say and that you'll be able to hear and think of get to right away without a complicated URL is simply to go to bountysource.com. If you can't spell bounty or source, it's probably not for you. No, kidding. Bountysource.com and just look for Diaspora. All the teams are there. That's how I found it. So you can find it that way. And you can, there's actually, I don't know if you even knew this, Hank, but there's actually a general donate from there that you can use. So you don't have to put a bounty. I think I put a couple bucks on something, maybe edit, because it's the biggest request, I believe, right now.
You had there was a $5 one I saw yesterday when I was looking for some small thing to work on. I forget what it was now, but I saw your name like, that's nice. Yeah, that's good. Bounty sources are great ways to contribute to the project. There are no paid developers on the project. That sort of infrastructure takes a lot. And so that makes sense if you have a team of 5, 6, 10 people or more, where you have the payroll and all the tax implications and all of those sorts of things. It's a 100% volunteer effort, but we do pay out bounties through the Bounty Source program, or the project does. I don't want to do the. So, like for example, there is a feature that just is going in one of the upcoming releases where someone got a $250 bounty. It was one of the I think it was getting over the 4 megabyte upload limit for photos. So the bounties there's a lot of bounties. There's several dozen of them. There are 400 some feature requests and issues in GitHub. There's a lot of things that people would want, but it obviously takes time and prioritization and all that sort of stuff. But the nice thing about Bounty Source is also, if you're a contributor, Just work on whatever you want on, and to get, claim the $50 or $100 or whatever the bounty happens to be for something. And then that gets integrated in through the standard GitHub pull request system. And then that can be your contribution and getting a little something out of that besides just improving your own user experience.
Okay, and Jay, you were chomping at the bit, or champing at it, I should say. It's a quick verb. What do you have to say? And also, James wants to say something. Go ahead, Jay.
So, Hank, and I apologize if you've already covered this, but about how many people would you say are active participants in the developer community around Diaspora?
I'd say 5 or 6 people who are actively interacting with the GitHub repository, and like from a coding perspective, there are a couple more who are, let's say 2 or 3 more that are working on like outreach, marketing, those sorts of things. But all those are again, there is no person that's doing this as their full-time job. It's all volunteer effort after hours. So while there are several people, we can always use more. I've actually had 3 different people reach out to me in the last couple of weeks saying that they want to start helping contribute in some way. Ironically, a lot of them are coders, and one of the things I've been pushing out recently is a software development project is more than just coders. There is a lot that goes into that. There's testers, marketers, there's outreach, there is just getting the word out, and then coding is important too. But yeah, I would say there are about 8 people. That is not 8 full FTEs or 8 like full-time people, but there are 8 individuals. I would say there's probably maybe 2 FTEs worth of effort that go into it every month. And again, I'm hoping that we can, as we get more and more of this, see more and more of this momentum, that translates into more and more contributors across the board.
And what would you say are the top 3 areas that would be most valuable for the project?
In terms of like ways to contribute, or you mean features?
Ways to contribute, ways that the community could contribute.
Well, the obvious one is development. Even though I just said that it's more than just development, we still could use a lot of support by having more development horsepower. Following that, again, the testing of releases is important. Right now, for minor release cycles, it's a little bit here, a little bit there, but we actually have people who run the latest version of the software, like the bleeding edge version, not the latest released version. And even though we have really good unit tests, and in the review process, we try to wring out bugs, having some assistance there is very helpful. And then working on documentation and outreach is the next thing, where our profile is high in our own little world, but it isn't high relative to the global world. I tell the story, and I wrote on my blog how I went to RubyConf, and they had never heard the term Fediverse or Diaspora or Mastodon for the first couple of days. And then finally I think it was on the 3rd day, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that project that died, right? I'm like, no, they're all doing quite well, actually. So getting the word out is actually as important as the software, because what we have right now in all of the federated networks are a critical mass issue, I think, which is, and I suffer from this as well, I have a great community of people I interact with on Diaspora and on Mastodon. What I don't have is my real life friends. They are all concentrated on Instagram and Facebook. They didn't start there, right? So they were on Friendica, and they were on Facebook, and I'm sorry, MySpace and Friendster before Facebook existed. And it wasn't like an en masse one day everyone popped up on Facebook and Instagram. It was a migration process over several years, but that was laying the seeds of someone was posting pictures of their birthday party, and they couldn't get to them without actually being part of, like, going to those links. And then once they got there, they decided to stay. So I would say helping get the user base up is a tremendous thing that people can do if they have no coding skills, or they have no time to to contribute to the project directly, they're contributing substantially by helping increase the user community, and that will help make this a place for more and more people.
And if by any chance you're a refugee from Google Plus, there are a couple of pods that have been created. Pod is just one server that's running the software, and it's federated with other pods. The pods, I don't know the name of the other one. Maybe you do, Hank, but the one I know is called Pluspora, so it's Diaspora Plus, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of recognizable people. And when I say that, I mean, I was on Google Plus since day one, refreshing the screen until I got into the beta. And so when it shut down, I basically immediately left because I got really sick of people talking about various things, and it had gone downhill. But it was a good place. And a lot of the most interesting posters, and by that I mean in something that you can judge not just subjectively but objectively, by meaning people who aren't just posting shares of memes, but actually saying things that are from their own brains or creations, as I did actually. The point is, those people are on Diaspora. There's a thing called MeWe, but a lot of people have mentioned that there's some oddball attitudes from the management, even though I understand that Sir Tim is part of that on the advisory commission or something. Anyway, that's all very weird. Also, on the same topic, I just read about a blog post that suggested that you really shouldn't quit Facebook. You should go there once in a while and taunt people, not be a jerk, I mean, but taunt them about coming over to the Federation. So that makes a lot of sense to me, and is something that the outreach, that you could do for outreach. James, you are now champing on the bit, I believe.
I am indeed. And somebody who has been through, tried, used, abused just about every kind of social media that there is. I have to admit, Diaspora is one that I've never got to grips with. So I would appreciate, and I'm sure there are many other listeners to this broadcast, a quick explanation of what is special about Diaspora, what it offers that others do not, what it's really good at, and then very quickly run through how you actually join. Whilst you've been talking, I've actually I found a pod, if that's the right terminology, in Germany, and I've signed up to it, but I don't know where to go next. So a little bit of guidance would be very much appreciated.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good point. One of the things that I constantly run into when talking about that is why is it different? Why do I care? Ironically, the argument I'm about to make resonates far more with people who have never joined Facebook or any of those things because they're concerned about their data privacy and all of that, because that's one of the giant advantages of the platform. So you have control over your data insofar as Diaspora, like the other pieces, the other social networks in the Fediverse ecosystem, are such that you can set up your own pod or your own server. You're correct. That's the term we use for servers, is pods, and you can then start interacting with the rest of the Diaspora Federation. And one of the examples we constantly use as a corollary to that is email. Where everybody can set up their own email servers. All the email servers know how to talk to each other. So it's not like you can only send an email to yourself when you create an email server. They all know how to communicate, and therefore it opens up the space for communicating with anybody who actually has an email server. The same thing is true with Diaspora. You can create your own server, create your own accounts, and you're not just going to be talking to yourself. You'll be talking to everyone else in the Federation that federate with Diaspora. And that gives you incredible data control. However, obviously not everyone has the wherewithal to set up their own servers. I certainly didn't. I went out and found a pod that I actually liked. So when you think about data protection and data integrity, look at the difference that you'll see between this and the Facebooks of the world and that sort of thing is what sort of data, what happens with the data, what is the accessibility of the data. So, for example, the power of Facebook for an operator like Cambridge Analytica is the social graph. I can see all your friends. I can interact with all your friends or friends of friends. I can traverse the graph and using very standard APIs, get a lot of information about you and your habits and that sort of thing. That is literally impossible with Diaspora. I see someone waving their hands.
Just to add to that, the most recent Facebook incident had to do with the API that they turned on for Messenger. So you're talking to your friends in Messenger, the DMs. Well, these APIs, and one understands, by the way, if you're technical at all, you understand why. I guess the best example given was Spotify. So you're in Spotify and you're listening to some groovy track and you want to, message your girlfriend and say, hey, listen to this. The point is that the API allowed you to get into the Messenger and to see all the DM contacts. And I guess to read the DMs probably, because bottom line, Hank, is security or no security. You really shouldn't be saying anything anywhere online that you don't want to be published in the newspaper tomorrow. But there's much less a chance of that with Diaspora. Anyway, the APIs were turned on. They were finally turned off. But in the meantime, Spotify could look at your whole social graph too. So it isn't only Cambridge Analytica, but everybody.
Yeah.
No, and that is certainly one of the more poignant ones. I mean, and there's lots of information that you don't explicitly give permission to in those systems because their business model, their software model is around optimizing this experience so that they can sell the ads, and the ads are placed certain ways because of how they get paid, and they align with all of your previous other information in the social graph. Sometimes that's internally generated, sometimes that's externally consumed in order to extract information. There is no model like that with Diaspora.
I think Facebook knows more about your social graph than you do generally, because because you don't think about it all the time, whereas they do basically. I mean, it's not they thinking, it's not a person thinking, but they have that stuff written down. And I think you put your finger on it. There is no business model for Diaspora, and that's why nobody's getting paid. So it's a volunteer effort. And sure, it doesn't look like anything you're used to seeing. For example, MeWe, I mentioned, people are seduced by it because it looks really good. It looks as good as Google Plus did, maybe better even. Or it looks like, well, Facebook has never looked good to me, by the way. I think it's horribly ugly. Go ahead, James.
But yeah, so far you just said what it doesn't do, i.e. give your information away. But I'm more interested in what it does do. And in particular, one of the most useful things about social networks is being able to find people and communicate with them. So now that I've signed up, is it possible for you to find me? Can you find me using Diaspora? And if so, how do you do it?
Right. That is a very good point. So we have the double-edged sword of all of this data protection. So if I'm on a traditional social network, Facebook, and I log in, how do I get started? It's going to first start off by feeding me a bunch of content. The way that you do that in Diaspora is you follow tags. One of the reasons why the first landing page asks you to come up with 5 things that you'd be interested in is so that it can start pre-populating your timeline. Or your stream, as we call it. And so what'll happen is if you follow no tags, you don't see much of anything. You automatically follow the Diaspora headquarters account, but otherwise you'll have something empty. And so unlike the other systems where there are these deep learning or these other AI systems that are constantly trying to figure out what to send you, you're substantially tailoring the process by who you follow and what tags you follow. And so that also goes back to the second part that you do when you go into a new social network is you find that you're one friend, and then you look at all their friends, and the ones you recognize, you friend them, and then you friend them, and you friend them, and that's how a social graph works. That first step is impossible in Diaspora, and that double-edged sword is so you can't have someone who is writing a bot to collect all the information they can to figure out how everyone's connected to everyone else in Diaspora, but it makes it harder for new people to find people. Generally, people are discoverable. If you know their name, you'll see them. If you know their interests, you'll start seeing them start popping up as you start following tags. It's a little more complicated than that, but you have hit one of the problems that we're trying to help is how do we get new users to have a full, rich experience? One of the comments I mentioned on a previous podcast was I brought a friend from the real world into it. He was there for a couple of days. A few weeks later, I had shared a link on Facebook where I always say via Diaspora, back to the more of like the guerrilla marketing through the Facebook ecosystem comment reminded me earlier. And he sent me a direct message and said, I can't use Diaspora because there aren't any English posts. Everything's in German and French. I'm like, okay. So that is a problem insofar as the put fat tags he's following, what people he's following, those sorts of things. But he didn't know that. He just assumed this is content really directed towards non-US, non-English speakers. And so we have to address that, but we're going to have to address that in ways that preserve the privacy and data protection aspect. So unfortunately, one of the comments that comes up once every couple of months is a suggestion of I should automatically be able to follow all these people or have suggestions for friends and those sorts of things. And as soon as you start adding those sorts of capabilities, you have now opened yourself up to the types of data trolling that the other social networks have, and we don't want to do that.
And also they're horrible at it. Google Plus, I was there all those years, and Google knows a lot about you because, put it in for more personally, they know a lot about me because I've been on it. I have Gmail, I have all this data, and their suggested user list was atrocious. All the suggestions they ever made about communities. I mean, they made, you may be of a particular political bent and you see the opposite bent that you hate the most in life come by with a suggestion, join this community. And you realize that this is, by the way, one of the reasons that I laugh every time I hear AI, because that's a perfect example of how it doesn't work, even though they claim to be using it. Anyway, to specifically address James's problem, Mr. James Bodie's problem, I asked you to, in Wired, to post your ID, because this is how this works. For people to find you, you post your Diaspora ID. And once, Hank, I don't know about you, but what I found is that once you have a little kernel of people, it becomes much easier. You don't have to sweep your whole contacts list, which you can't do anyway, fortunately, in Diaspora. But LinkedIn will do that. They tricked me into doing it by keeping that prompt kept popping up. And finally, I accidentally clicked on go ahead and upload all my contacts. That's the day before I quit.
I had a similar experience on, I think it was Facebook, where I got reflexively into, I saw the same prompt. I always said no, and then they changed the prompt language, and I wasn't paying close enough attention, and then the damage is done. So, exactly. But yes, it is like a social network in terms of like once you start following a person, you're going to start seeing their posts, and as people interact with their posts, you're going to see the people who interacted, and so on. But the entropy or the speed at which that happens is diminished by not exposing people's friends list, and that's intentional.
So for me to be found, I actually have to tell you what my identity is.
Well, here's the thing. If you were on the same pod as me, I could find you by name. So that's a whole other thing. We probably don't want to get into this too extensively because we'll be talking again next week about Diaspora. But my point is that the choice of a pod, same thing with Mastodon, the choice of a Mastodon instance is really hard unless you know exactly what you want to do, because you can go in and sample the stuff, but these things generally have themes. Now, it happens that Pluspora, the theme was Google Plus refugees. But there could also be telecom. I mean, people that you would already know, James, that we know on other channels, they may have had their own pod. We created on VUC, we have masto.vuc.me, which you know that if you join it, you're going to see most of the people that are the core members who are talking right now, plus a few other people. It's a very small instance, but we're running it. And I would do the same for Diaspora, but there's not really a need for it because we're in the Federation. So this
and I would
go ahead.
Well, so you're right. So if you never make any public posts, the only way I would be able to find you is to know your name or to see you interacting with someone else's posts. But let's say, for example, you are a big fan of Linux, and so you're making posts with the hashtag Linux in it, and I follow the Linux hashtag. I will see your posts. And if I see your posts sufficiently frequently, I might like them, I might decide to start, I might put you in one of my aspects, and then I will start seeing your posts more. And then you'll get a notification that I did that, and you may decide to follow me back. So that's more of, that's how I found most of the people I interact with on Diaspora. Actually, it is because they posted to hashtags I follow and I like their content, and vice versa. or they found me because they like the content I was posting to the hashtags I found interesting. And so it's a bit more of an organic experience from the people who are interacting with the network. But a passive user who isn't connected to anybody, who's not interacting on anyone's posts, that they're gonna be harder to find. There is the option actually also for people who are very sensitive to being searchable to turn off search on your profile, so that if you're not comfortable with your name showing up on searches, you actually have the means of shutting that down as well. So again, going back to, we want private, data control and data privacy is very important. We're trying to achieve that.
So you can be a guy with no friends who doesn't want to talk to anybody.
Yep.
You could, yeah.
And never discoverable, and you just passively reading the content stream. That's perfectly, it'd be like a giant RSS aggregation. And that'd be more that there's probably a lot of people who are like that actually.
There is, speaking of RSS, sorry, Corrado, speaking of RSS, I just want to mention real quick that several people I've seen are actually working on integrating ways for Diaspora, Mastodon, whatever else there is out there to talk to each other. So my hope also is that eventually there's going to be this humongous connectivity with all of these things. And the other thing is that somebody was writing, no, I can't remember if it's Diaspora or Mastodon, there was a way to bring in an RSS feed as well. So you could be sitting in your Diaspora client or account or whatever and be reading RSS from other places too. Sorry, Corrado, go ahead. Oop, muted.
Yeah, sorry, I was just mentioning before what James was referring to, what was used to be called as lurking. So lurkers, those that never interact but just look at the feed. What I picked up from a few minutes ago was, to me, what's the probably most important marketing that we need to do to get Diaspora to be known is guerrilla marketing. So use our own Diaspora monikers and IDs and links and everything in every post we do in every other social media platform. That to me is a good vector. Twitter at the moment can allow you to use a very long name. The username is still short, but you can use a very long name with a lot of content in it. That could be a good marketing place to call back and then get all your followers to know that there is another platform. For example, your signature on Facebook to be always referring to that. So crossing all the platforms together. But also what I would suggest, and I know this is a core problem, is to get the Diaspora native app on your phone running. Although it's old, it has been last updated, as far as I can see, from Google Play in 2016, is perfectly functional. It works flawlessly. So you have Diaspora with you at all times. You don't need a PC. It's getting Diaspora in your daily life and your constant, during your commute and everything else.
So you could be sitting in McDonald's and staring at Diaspora instead of Facebook Messenger.
Exactly.
No, that's perfectly true, Corrado. I am looking forward. One of the results of the API, I'm very much looking forward to somebody writing a decent client, because really you're looking at a kind of almost not broken, but a very hobbled web version. And there's a couple things you can't even do. It's kind of annoying, but at least you're there and you can read posts if you care to do that on the phone. Jay, you had a question about hardware, and then I wanted to move on to a few other things. What was
Yeah, Hank, what's the minimum hardware requirement to run a pod or server?
If you have a small pod or server, you can get away with like I would say 2 processors, 4 gigs of RAM. It'd be I would say like a relatively small system. It doesn't take a lot. The memory usage I'm seeing on my development test server, which is the second smallest instance you can create on DigitalOcean, it's using like less than half the memory, let's say a third of the memory, and it's never crossing 30%. If you're doing something, if you're trying to create something that might grow into something that's like Pluspora, that's going to need some pretty good horsepower behind it. But if you just want to create it, do it in Dabble, you can get by with like there on the website. It says what the minimum requirements are. I should have had that handy, but I don't. Hold on a second. Let me just read it. But yeah, it's not a huge system to get it up and running. If you're looking to play around with it, it's all free software, so you can run it on Linux. Oh, this isn't working. Oh well.
The harder,
but no Raspberry Pi.
I haven't tried. That might be an interesting experiment.
The harder question, in my opinion, because I would be happy to do that, get a DigitalOcean thing going, but the harder part of it is updates. And so on our Mastodon, we're renting for $5 a month, which I consider to be pretty trivial. We have theoretically up to about 100 users. We're probably 25 right now, but that Mastodon is run by a guy who does all the and we always have the latest version. He takes care of all of that stuff transparently. So for $5, you know, if I found somebody who would do it for $5 a month for Diaspora, I'd happily create one, and then we could all be on it, and we would find each other, and then other people could find us. But for now, that's not going to happen because we have no one who wants to spend time updating constantly. I don't know how often does that even happen though, Hank? Maybe it's not that often that there are updates.
There are minor releases every 6 to 8 weeks or so usually.
Well, that's not so bad.
No, it's you know, a lot of times there hasn't been a big splashy release in about a year and a half or so, and unfortunately that gives the perception that there is no development going on when there is development going on. There are lots of little things as well as larger things we want to do with the project, and those unfortunately get a little overshadowed because there is no big splash somewhere. But yeah, there's a new release about every 6 to 8 weeks, where larger changes obviously have to aggregate to a major release, but the minor releases are things like you're talking about the mobile interface. There are lots of small tweaks to the mobile interface which are hopefully coming up in the next couple of releases. The pull requests are being worked on right now to help make that process a little bit better. I'm perpetually using it. That's probably the majority of my time I'm using it in the browser on my iOS device.
Mm-hmm.
So those sorts of things are very important to me. So yes,
you're actually better off to use, if you have a tablet, you're actually probably better off just to use a browser, because the mobile, one of the things about the mobile version that I can't figure out is that there's no way to post public. I've tried to reset that and it doesn't work. I don't know why.
That's fascinating.
So yeah, you have to reset it each time because I have had a bunch of limited posts. We're not going to get into aspects and all that. What I would say that we want to underline is getting people in and on it and to figure out, start posting. James, you probably need to do a couple of posts, James.
Why though? I'm just up. I've managed to, I think, publicize my arrival, and all of a sudden, Diaspora headquarters has done something to say, hi, we're here.
Nice.
They've connected with me. And what I quite like is in the description, it says, we are social. Here's our Facebook account.
Well, we still need
I love that.
James, we still need your ID. You can put it in Wire if you don't want to publish.
Wire.
What's that?
I put it in Wire.
I don't
okay.
see it. Oh, you did it where? And I don't see it anywhere.
I got to scroll. Yep, there it is.
VUC.
I don't see it. Why do I not see it?
I don't know.
I see Michael's post is the last thing I see.
Hank sees it.
No, I'm sorry. That was Randy's.
Yeah, I put mine in. James, what do you?
Oh no, James is right above that. It's just hyperlinked, I think. No, that's not it.
VUC Visions 2018. I'll put it in 2018.
Maybe try that again.
Is there a 2019 one?
No, there's active VUC. And Wire?
Yeah.
No, Wire is active VUC. There is no 2018. You're on Twitter or something, I guess. See, this is too many channels. But anyway, actually, James, aren't you James Bodie at something dot something? Can't you say it?
Yeah.
What is it? James Bodie at
all one word at. Oh, I lost it now.
James Bodie, one word.
At.
Then the domain name.
Where
Well, what's it?
Yeah,
The domain name.
diaspora.microdata.co.uk.
.co.uk. Well, that's pretty complicated, but I'm doing a search. Let's see how long this takes. Microdata.co.uk. Okay, it's still searching, still turning, still there. It is. Add contact. I'll put you in, and I'm going to put you in friends, which is the most cherished, the most cherished aspect.
Okay.
Anyway, all right.
Okay,
So now you're going to get a notification saying that I'm following you. And you, interesting thing, if you want, you can leave auto follow on. And there's Corrado. Corrado, I should be following you, but if he's on +4, yeah, I'm sure Corrado.
Yes, you are. You
got you.
We are following each other. Yeah.
There you go. In fact, I can show this.
Now, can I get to see your contacts?
You will. No, but you can get to see what I post.
Yeah.
Let's remove this. All right. So I'll show you. Get rid of ZipDX, and here we go. I'm going to show everybody this because I don't think there's anything. Screen share application window. And there he is. Okay. That's it. Present to everybody. So there's Corrado. That's how this works. Okay. So you have an easy to say Corrado M at pluspro.com, but there's also a thing. This is presumably the profile URL. This thing here, which I can't. There we go.
Yeah.
So that's profile URL, which you could put in any posts or either one actually. And Hank, I know I'm following Hank.
How to add a person?
There you go. Well, the ID works in Diaspora, but the link works from everywhere. Everywhere you leave it, you can. The profile is visible from everywhere.
Right. James, look for Corrado M. Oh, yeah.
But
and look for me, Randulo.
How?
But there's a search.
Where?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's
up at the top.
Yeah, it seems to me there's just a field up there.
Yeah, just start typing.
On the mobile, there's just the usual lens. You click.
Oh, are you on the phone? Are you on a mobile device, James, or on a desktop?
I'm on my Mac.
Yeah, so there should be a search field right up top right. I'd show you, but there's a picture of a certain president of a certain country that's up at the top. Oh, that doesn't matter. Here we go. All right, James, look. Watch carefully while I share my screen. And here it is. All right, so that's my latest post. You
have to go to pluspora.com.
No, you should have a search. If you don't have a search, I don't know what to tell you. Hank, how do some pods not have the search on the web?
I would imagine not. I can work with you afterwards to take a look at that. Just send me a message on Wire, and we can work that out. No, everything should have a search.
Yeah.
Sorry, James. Just go on pluspro.com, log in, or your pod, log in, and in the top left corner, just beside your name, there is a search box.
It's funny. It's on the right on mine.
Sorry, on the right hand side. Yes.
Okay.
Beside your name. There's a search box.
There we go.
What I can suggest, Hank, is possibly to have the ability on a pod of any sort to have on the left hand side, as Twitter does, the trending hashtags. So hashtags that have traffic. Is that something that is in the works, or is there a bounty on it?
I'm not sure about a bounty. I've seen that as a recommendation before. But again, I haven't seen a bounty or anyone working on that. But that is an interesting idea as well,
because that drives people and connects people. If you have on the screen what's happening, practically is what creates interest.
Yeah, I could see where there would be some resistance to that. It's kind of a negative, reminiscent of the big networks. But I mean, it's a good idea, actually.
If it works, why reinvent the wheel? That connects people. It doesn't matter if other people did it. they don't have the IP on that, I think.
Yeah, but this said, it depends on whether you're interested in what the masses, the unwashed masses, are following, what's trending. I personally have an aversion to that, but you're right. That's a good way to start. Or maybe a page, rather than showing them on the left column, maybe just and somebody I think is doing this actually. Somebody is posting these now that I think of it. I just saw a post go by on Diaspora not long ago that showed like the top 10 tags.
There's a node info statistics calculator, which goes into the federation.info, which lists like all of the different federated networks, user bases, active users, that sort of thing. I think that's one of the things that gets reported out, but it's not something that is available to your average user. Oh,
okay. But as I said, somebody was looking into that, and I don't know where that is now. I do have Mr. James Bodie he's in my aspects, and also I saw and shared his post. That's the other thing. You share people's posts. If you see our friend Jim, who's obsessed with facts, for example, James, if he's on here, Canuck Jim.
Yeah, Canuck Jim.
If you could share him and put a hashtag facts or something.
One could, but one probably won't.
Anyway,
Hank G. There we go.
That's me.
See, there you go. So, Hank, I should probably use my diasp.org. It's more status. Right?
No, absolutely not. That's the whole point of the federating is you can be on Diaspora, I can be on diasp.org. It doesn't matter. It's and that is also one of the things which we always have to work around with people who aren't used to federated networks. They think they have to be on the same machine to talk to each other, because they're used to having the portal that comes up as a giant mass versus the thousands of servers that it is. There's a learning curve. We have to work on that. We have to work on getting over that. And that's something which that hasn't really been addressed as well in the federated networks, not just Diaspora, but others as well. It's an inertia which prevents people from coming over. It feels different. It's a little foreign, and it's not worth it until it is. And that goes back to the critical mass. If all of your friends are on there, there's an inertia to getting involved. You'll overcome that inertia. When you're the spear, when you're the kind of the tip of the spear when it comes to these sorts of things, that's a little bit harder to overcome. So we need to work on that.
And I'm going to add in as non-sexist way as I can that there are features that are sexy. There's colors, schemes that are professionally designed, and there's a look and feel of certain networks. Again, Facebook for some reason doesn't even have that, but others do, especially the newer ones. But personally, I mean, somebody can have a nice body, again, masculine, feminine, doesn't matter. They can be, have all kinds of qualities, but they may not be smart. They may not be saying interesting things. And on Diaspora, I really do find that people generally are saying there's more interesting things there, just like there was on Google Plus at one time, than there is on, say, a Facebook or a Twitter. Now, on those two other networks, I'm not on Facebook anymore, but on Twitter, for example, I'm merciless about dropping people who are saying things that I'm not interested in. I cull the herd almost every day. I drop people and try to follow new people. So there's a lot of work involved in that. And if you want to see interesting things, you do have to do that work. But in my point of view, it isn't the look of the thing. It isn't the cover of the book that matters. Maybe someday someone will mess around. Maybe it'll be by pod that they'll do CSS. They do this with Mastodon, by the way. People have messed with the CSS and changed their page looks and so on. And that's wonderful.
And you can do that with Diaspora too. It's just most people seem to keep the default styles. In fact, I was just interacting with someone who was trying to do that on their pod. They just stood up to do that. Mm-hmm. The site it definitely has some it needs some refreshing in certain areas. It's certainly more than useful, but it has there are some things that it would be nice for it to do a little bit better.
It actually looks like Friendster, something like kind of.
Yeah, I liken it to like a far less cluttered LinkedIn or something like that.
It's very simple, but the point is, if the content is there that you're interested in, that's what matters. And right. It's hard to explain. I mean, I'm all for it. And by the way, when I said there was nothing happening, earlier. What I meant was that we got on, and I dragged about 20, 30 people from the VUC crowd on Diaspora in 2010 when it first started. And the main guy was still alive because he's not anymore. And so there was a little more excitement in the development at that time. I think it's starting to perk up again. But my point was that many people came back once in a while, maybe once every 6 months or a year. And there really was no change because we weren't connected to anybody other than ourselves. So we would joke around and go, what's new? Nothing. Okay, see you next year. And that's no longer true. But it's also no longer true because we, meaning Hank, myself, maybe Corrado and James will eventually, and everybody else will realize that you have to start following people whose content is interesting. So that's it.
Okay.
I can't believe we've talked about this whole thing, and I was planning on doing some other topics, but
yeah, does Diaspora support any real-time modes like voice or video?
It has depending on if the administrator wants to I guess it's not really real time. I would say XMPP. If the pod administrator decides they want to enable that on their pod, and then the XMPP protocol allows that to federate to everyone else that's in Diaspora, not just the people that are on that pod.
So yeah, text chat is there. I'm not sure that would be a good idea to even get involved in that. There's so many other ways to.
No, I agree with that. Yeah.
And it's rare that unless you're in business and are trying to do support or something, it's pretty rare that you want to escalate to video or even audio within the platform.
Well, I'm trying to place Diaspora within the universe of all the other platforms there are, like Matrix, for example. Matrix is a very federated system.
Yeah, it's true.
And and open source as well. So trying to compare Diaspora, where that comes in relation to Matrix, for example, would be useful.
Yeah, and that the federated platforms are again, like PeerTube is one that's like the YouTube. I try to make the corollaries to what people are used to seeing. So Matrix to me feels a lot like Slack. PeerTube feels like YouTube. PixelFed feels like Instagram. Mastodon feels like Twitter. Diaspora feels like Facebook or more of the longer form types of social media type platforms. And so that's how I kind of, in my own head, I kind of segment them that way.
I think that's valid. Anybody else have any, because we're actually getting up on the hour here. I can't even remember what else we were going to talk about. Probably not the time to get into SS7. What?
You really want to get into SS7 and Diana?
We need to get Diana. That's why we can't.
Oh, no. Here's another little interesting little subject that came up. One that we all need to use, and that is password and key management. So I've been using 1Password for a number of years now, and I can't operate without it because I've got so many passwords, and every single password is different. But we're looking for different ways of doing it, particularly for organizations where you want to share your password or a set of passwords across a number of people, so that you have, and we want to have an audit trail as well. So, and ideally, we don't want to have to pay money for it. We want to run things. So I was looking for open source based password management systems.
I crawled a little when you said sharing passwords and sharing accounts, because that goes against every accountability and every possible backtracking of who did what. So that's completely against any policy I can think of.
Yeah, well, okay. Be a purist. But the mission here is to have team managed assets. But being able to manage access and control access to those entities in a way that allows you to work as a team. So that's the mission. So at the lowest level, people share passwords, but I think we can be a little bit more sophisticated than that.
I was going to joke and say blockchain, but
Jay, do you have an ID on Diaspora? Did you post it in Wire?
No, I didn't post anything, but since Hank has breached the blockchain, the B word, and I don't see Randy taking a drink yet, but
because I got nothing left.
Okay.
I've already taken them all. Do you have?
There is something that's interesting. There's something that's interesting that is being explored in the cryptography and blockchain world, which is something called multi-signature, where it takes like 2 out of 3 private keys to unlock something, and to effectively do collaboration as well as like agency. Because James is making a great point. There are numerous cases where we need someone to act as on our behalf and as our agent, which is kind of somewhat different than collaboration, which James was talking about initially. But this is a big problem that needs to be solved and addressed, is how do we effectively collaborate? How do we effectively assign agency to other people for certain periods of time, and yet maintain that accountability, which Corrado's talking about. So it's an interesting set of problems for sure.
What I suggest and what I use for password management is, because I use that on multiple platforms, including Linux, Windows, and Android, is KeePass. That has a number of clients that work on every single platform natively, and the database is stored on the cloud. So you can access that database from everywhere I am with every device. And that's the way I operate. I can also log in to my database from a web client. I can open in any type of foreign or not personal device. So I practically have, yeah.
Corrado, you're comfortable with that? That you get this password database in the cloud?
Well, the password database is completely encrypted with Blowfish 256. So it's decrypted only when it's on the local application. Even if someone would access that on the cloud, it has no value at all. Do you think there's a vulnerability there?
Well, it just seems to me like, I assume you've got like one private key to get into unlock your database of all your other disparate passwords in the cloud. And,
oh, yeah, of course. It has two-factor authentication to open the database. A password, and you have to use an authenticator every time you open the database. So it's a key that is rotating, is never the same, and so on. So that as far as I'm concerned with the security of the application and the database, I'm okay with that, and I'm quite a control freak.
So do they have like a customer service department where if something happens to you, could your wife or significant other, whatever, act on your behalf?
No, there is all the instructions in an envelope in my lock. In my house, there is an envelope with all the instructions should I be run over by a bus. That's all.
Mm-hmm. But if the bus crashes into your house and starts a fire, that's it.
Yeah, at that point, I think it's no longer worth bothering.
It's time to close and go to the mature audiences only segment. So anybody else have any final business that we need to communicate, besides the fact that next week we're going to be 100% Diaspora, which somehow we were this week. But we're going to have some other developers here. Hopefully, we've got a couple of commitments, hopefully, again.
Well, I'd just like to queue, somewhere in the queue, this challenge of password management, and just drop into the conversation the name Bitwarden. Bitwarden. It's an open
Warden's prison.
Yeah, it's an open source project, but the company who kind of manage it also offer a paid cloud service as well. So it's one of these open source projects that you can either run your own, or if you don't feel like doing it, you can pay somebody else to do it for you.
It sounds reasonable. Of course, open source projects suffer in common from one slight thing, and that is the naming of them. generally, for example, the name diaspora is one of the most horrible. If you're going to look up something like on Google, it has a meaning, and it means something that's very wide ranging, because it's, you know, diaspora, which has been around for hundreds of years. So that may have been a mistake, but it's probably too late to change that now. Anything else? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Going once, going twice.
Apparently not.
Apparently not. So I think we just need to do this.